The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of paper being placed on the judge's bench. Marcus Thompson sat frozen, his expensive Navy suit suddenly feeling tight around his neck. The judge looked up from the document, and what he said next would echo through that room for years to come. Mr. Thompson, according to these financial records, you're asking this court for half of assets you never owned, funded by money you never earned, while insulting the woman who paid for every luxury you've enjoyed for 15 years. That moment destroyed everything Marcus thought he knew about his life. But to understand how a man could be so catastrophically wrong about his own existence, we need to go back to when Marcus Thompson believed he was untouchable. This is the story of Marcus Thompson, a 42-year-old man who walked through life with the confidence of someone who believed he'd earned everything he had. Tall, always impeccably dressed, with graying temples that gave him what he thought was distinguished authority. He drove a Mercedes S-Class, lived in a mansion in an exclusive neighborhood outside Chicago, and introduced himself at networking events as a serial entrepreneur and business strategist. Sarah Thompson was his wife of 15 years. At 38, she had the kind of quiet elegance that didn't demand attention, but somehow commanded respect. Dark hair always styled perfectly, a genuine smile that made people trust her instantly, and a patience that Marcus had mistaken for passivity. She volunteered at the local library, hosted charity events, and was known in their social circle as the perfect wife. What no one knew, not their friends, not their neighbors, and certainly not Marcus, was that Sarah came from a family of what her father called invisible wealth. Her grandfather had made strategic investments in telecommunications in the 1970s. Her father had turned that fortune into a diversified portfolio worth north of $50 million. The family's philosophy was simple: stay quiet, live modestly relative to your means, and never advertise what you have. When Sarah married Marcus 17 years ago, her father had one condition: if you support him, do it smart. Document everything. And make sure he knows it's a partnership, not a handout. Sarah had tried, but Marcus heard what he wanted to hear. Let's go back to 2012. Marcus and Sarah had been married for 6 years. They lived in a comfortable but modest house, and Marcus was working as a mid-level sales manager at a telecommunications firm. He was good at his job, charismatic, persuasive, driven, but he was also restless. "I'm tired of working for someone else," he told Sarah one evening over dinner. "I have ideas, connections. I could build something real, but I need capital." Sarah had seen this coming. She watched him grow increasingly frustrated, increasingly convinced that he was destined for something bigger. That night, she made a call to her father. 3 weeks later, Marcus walked into a lawyer's office to sign paperwork for a new business venture. Thompson Strategic Consulting would help mid-sized companies optimize their operations. The initial capital, $850,000. "This is incredible," Marcus said, reviewing the documents. "The business loan came through faster than I expected." Sarah smiled softly. "My father helped facilitate it through his banking connections." What she didn't say, and what Marcus never asked, was that it wasn't a loan from a bank. It was her father's money, structured through a family trust, with the expectation that it would be paid back once the business was profitable. Marcus signed the documents without reading the fine print. Why would he? He was finally getting what he deserved. The business did moderately well. Not spectacularly, but enough to sustain itself and pay Marcus a comfortable salary. In 2014, Sarah's family helped them purchase their dream home, a 6-bedroom mansion with a pool, home theater, and 3-car garage. The price tag, $2.3 million. "Can we really afford this?" Marcus asked, though his eyes were already imagining which room would be his office. "The down payment is handled," Sarah assured him. "My trust fund is covering it, and with your business doing well, we can manage the rest." Again, Marcus didn't ask questions. The house was purchased under an LLC controlled by Sarah's family trust, with both their names on the occupancy agreement. Marcus saw his name on the paperwork and assumed ownership. That assumption would cost him everything. The years that followed established a pattern. Marcus lived large. Expensive dinners, luxury vacations, designer clothes. He attributed it all to his business acumen. The company made around $200,000 a year in profit, which sounded impressive. What Marcus never calculated was that after his own generous salary, business expenses, and the lifestyle costs, the company was essentially breaking even, or quietly losing money covered by periodic consulting fees paid by Sarah's family trust. But Marcus had convinced himself of his own success story, and that delusion made him vulnerable to something worse than financial ignorance, moral bankruptcy. Jessica Martinez walked into Thompson Strategic Consulting in September 2019. 27 years old, fresh out of a marketing MBA program, eager to prove herself. She had auburn hair, a bright smile, and the kind professional ambition that Marcus found intoxicating. "We need someone who can modernize our client outreach," Marcus told Sarah that evening. "I hired a new executive assistant. Smart girl, really sharp." Sarah nodded, not sensing anything unusual. Why would she? Marcus had hired staff before. The first 3 months were professional. Jessica was good at her job, organized, proactive, tech-savvy in ways Marcus wasn't. She set up their social media, streamlined their CRM system, and brought in 2 new clients. Marcus was impressed. "You're the best hire I've made in years," he told her one evening as they worked late on a presentation. "I just want to contribute," Jessica replied. "You've built something really impressive here, Mr. Thompson." That was the first crack. The validation, the admiration from someone who saw him the way he wanted to be seen. Self-made, brilliant, successful. Sarah had stopped gushing about his achievements years ago, not because she didn't support him, but because married life settles into comfortable routine. Marcus interpreted that comfort as neglect. By January 2020, the late nights became more frequent. The conversations became more personal. Jessica mentioned relationship troubles with her boyfriend. Marcus complained about feeling unappreciated at home. They started having lunch together. Just the 2 of them. The first kiss happened in March 2020, in the parking garage after a client meeting. Marcus had made a particularly successful pitch, and the adrenaline was pumping. "You were amazing in there," Jessica said, her hand on his arm. Marcus looked at her, young, admiring, seeing him as the man he believed he was. He kissed her, and she kissed him back. "This is crazy," Marcus said, pulling away, though his heart was racing. "Maybe crazy is what you need," Jessica whispered. That night, Marcus went home and looked at Sarah reading a book on the couch, glasses perched on her nose, comfortable in sweatpants. He felt nothing but distance. When had she stopped making him feel special? What he didn't realize was that Sarah had been carrying the weight of their entire financial existence for years, quietly, thanklessly. While he chased validation, she was making sure they didn't lose everything. The affair accelerated quickly. Hotel rooms charged to the company credit card. Weekend business trips to conferences that didn't exist. Marcus was sloppy, drunk on the excitement of it all. He stopped noticing the small things. Sarah's quiet observations, her pointed questions about expenses, the way she started keeping her own records. By summer 2021, Marcus wasn't just cheating. He was checked out entirely. Sarah had become, in his mind, an obstacle to his authentic happiness. And Jessica had become the fantasy of a life where he was the hero of his own story. One night in August, after too much wine, Marcus looked at Sarah across the dinner table and felt something dark settle in his chest. Resentment. "You know what your problem is?" he said suddenly. Sarah looked up from her salad. "Excuse me? You've never understood what I do. You've never really supported my ambitions." Sarah set down her fork carefully. "Marcus, I've supported everything you wanted to do. Financially, maybe, because your family has money. But emotionally, you're just there. You don't challenge me. You don't inspire me." The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah's face remained calm, but something shifted behind her eyes. That was the moment she knew. Not just about the affair. She'd suspected that for months. But she knew that Marcus had rewritten their entire history in his head. He convinced himself that he was the victim. "I see," Sarah said quietly. "That was all. But that was enough." The next morning, Sarah made a phone call to one of the best divorce attorneys in Illinois, and she started building her case. Marcus had no idea that his life was about to implode in the most spectacular way possible. But every step toward that courtroom began with his next decision: to ask for a divorce, and to do it in the cruelest way possible. The affair with Jessica evolved from reckless to brazen. By fall 2021, Marcus had stopped pretending to hide it. He took Jessica to restaurants where colleagues might see them. He booked hotel suites instead of standard rooms, charging everything to the company American Express that he believed was his to control. "This place is incredible," Jessica said one Friday evening, standing in a suite at the Peninsula Hotel overlooking Chicago's Magnificent Mile. The room cost $1,200 a night. Marcus poured champagne, feeling every bit the successful man he imagined himself to be. "You deserve this. We deserve this. Don't you worry about." Jessica hesitated. Getting caught?" Marcus laughed, the sound carrying more arrogance than humor. "Sarah doesn't pay attention to the finances. She never has. Besides, these are business expenses, legitimate entertainment costs." What Marcus didn't know was that every single transaction on that card generated a digital record that was being quietly archived by Sarah's forensic accountant. Every charge, every hotel, every dinner that cost more than most people's monthly grocery bill. But in those moments, Marcus felt untouchable. The way Jessica looked at him, with admiration, desire, excitement, it was intoxicating. She made him feel like the protagonist of his own story. At home, Sarah had become scenery. Here, with Jessica, he was the main character again. The close calls should have warned him. In October, a business associate spotted them having dinner at Gibson Steakhouse. "Marcus, didn't know you had a dinner meeting tonight," the associate said, approaching their table with a knowing smile. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Last-minute client situation. "Jessica here is handling the tech side. You know how demanding clients can be." The associate nodded, but his eyes said he understood exactly what was happening. "Right. Well, don't work too hard." After he left, Jessica looked nervous. "That was close." "That was nothing," Marcus assured her. "People see what they expect to see. A boss having a working dinner with his assistant. Completely normal. Except it wasn't normal. And people were noticing. Whispers started circulating in their professional circles. Marcus's secretary noticed the hotel charges when processing expense reports. His accountant flagged several consulting fees that seemed unusual. But Marcus had an answer for everything, delivered with enough confidence that people stopped asking. Meanwhile, his treatment of Sarah deteriorated proportionally to his growing delusion. The man who once praised her quiet strength now mocked it. The man who claimed to love her patience now called it passivity. "Can you at least pretend to have an opinion about something?" He snapped one evening when she didn't react to his announcement about expanding the business. Sarah looked at him steadily. "I think you should make sure the current business is profitable before expanding." "There you go again," Marcus said dismissively. "Always so negative. Always doubting. This is why I can't talk to you about my work." The irony was suffocating. Sarah knew more about his business than he did. She'd been reviewing the quarterly reports her father's accountant sent her for years. She knew the company was hemorrhaging money. She knew that Marcus's salary was being subsidized by her family's trust. She knew everything, but she said nothing, because she was building something more valuable than a moment of confrontation, an airtight case. Sarah first suspected the affair in July 2021. It wasn't one dramatic discovery, but rather an accumulation of small inconsistencies that her logical mind couldn't ignore. The cologne was wrong. Marcus had worn the same Armani fragrance for a decade. Suddenly, in June, he switched to something younger, sharper. Tom Ford Noir. When she asked about it, he shrugged. "Thought I'd try something new." Then came the gym membership. Marcus had never been a fitness enthusiast, but suddenly he was going to gym 4 times a week, always showered before coming home, always with his phone face down. The phone was the biggest tell. Marcus had never been secretive about his device. Now it had a passcode she didn't know, and he carried it everywhere, even to the bathroom. One night in August, after he fell asleep, Sarah carefully lifted his hand and used his fingerprint to unlock his phone. What she found confirmed everything. Messages with Jessica that went beyond professional. Photos, hotel reservations, a digital trail of betrayal. Sarah could have confronted him that night, could have thrown the phone at him, screamed, demanded answers. Instead, she took screenshots. Methodically, calmly, she documented everything. Then she placed the phone back on his nightstand and went to the guest room, where she cried silently into a pillow. But by morning, the tears had stopped. In their place was something colder, sharper, strategic clarity. The next day, Sarah called her father. "I need the name of the best divorce attorney in Illinois, and I need a forensic accountant who specializes in business valuations." Her father was quiet for a moment. "How bad is it?" "He's having an affair." "But, Dad, I think he believes he owns everything. The house, the business, everything we built with your help. He doesn't remember who paid for it all." Her father's voice went hard. "Then it's time he learns the difference between earning something and being given it." Within a week, Sarah had retained Catherine Morrison, a divorce attorney whose reputation preceded her like thunder. Catherine specialized in high-asset divorces, where one party attempted to hide or misrepresent wealth. She was expensive, methodical, and she never lost. Their first meeting was in a downtown office with a view of Lake Michigan. Catherine reviewed the preliminary documents Sarah brought, property records, business formation papers, trust agreements, and looked up with something like amusement. "Mrs. Thompson, does your husband understand that he doesn't actually own any of this?" "I don't think he's ever looked closely," Sarah admitted. "When we bought the house, his name was on the occupancy agreement. He assumed that meant ownership. The business was formed with my family's capital. He thinks it was a bank loan that's been paid back." "Has it been paid back?" "Not a single dollar." Catherine smiled, though it wasn't warm. "Then we're going to have a very interesting day in court. But first, we need to document everything. Every transaction, every asset, every source of funding. Can you get me full access to financial records?" "My father can. Everything ran through family trusts and LLCs. It's all documented." "Perfect. Now here's my advice. Don't confront him. Don't tip him off. Let him file for divorce if that's where this is headed. Let him make demands. The bigger his demands, the better our case." Sarah understood immediately. "You want him to hang himself." "I want him to walk into that courtroom so confident, so certain of his position, that when reality hits, it hits like a freight train." Over the next months, Sarah played her role perfectly. She stayed calm when Marcus grew distant. She didn't ask about his late nights. She pretended not to notice when he came home smelling like someone else's perfume. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a team of professionals was building a comprehensive financial profile. The forensic accountant traced every dollar that had flowed through Thompson Strategic Consulting. The investigators documented Marcus's affair in excruciating detail: hotels, dinners, even weekend trips charged to company cards. By January 2022, Sarah's legal team had assembled a 200-page dossier that told a devastating story. Marcus Thompson was a man who had built his identity on borrowed money, borrowed success, and borrowed time. If Sarah thought Marcus's behavior had hit bottom, she was wrong. As 2022 progressed, his arrogance reached levels that shocked even her. It started with the public humiliation. At a charity dinner in February, Marcus was asked to give a speech about entrepreneurship. Sarah sat at their table, watching him take the stage. "Success isn't about luck," Marcus told a crowd of 100 people. "It's about vision, hard work, and the courage to take risks. When I started my company 10 years ago, I had nothing but an idea and determination. No safety net, no rich family to bail me out." Sarah felt dozens of eyes flicker toward her. People in their social circle knew she came from money. The message was clear. Marcus was claiming sole credit for everything and diminishing her to nothing. After the speech, a friend touched Sarah's arm. "Are you okay?" That was pointed. "I'm fine," Sarah said evenly. But she wasn't fine. She was furious, and she was ready. The humiliation continued at home. Marcus stopped pretending to be civil. "What did you even do today?" he'd asked dismissively. "More volunteer work? Must be nice to play around with charity projects while some of us actually work." Sarah volunteered 20 hours a week at organizations that mattered to her. She also managed their household, coordinated with accountants and lawyers her husband didn't know existed, and maintained the social relationships that kept up appearances. But to Marcus, none of that counted. In March, things escalated. They were having dinner with Marcus's business associates, and the conversation turned to their marriage. "How do you two make it work?" one of the wives asked, with Marcus working so much. Before Sarah could answer, Marcus laughed. "Sarah has it easy. She doesn't work, so she doesn't understand the pressure. She's lucky I'm successful enough to support her lifestyle." The table went uncomfortably quiet. Sarah set down her wine glass carefully, her hands steady. "That's an interesting perspective," she said softly. Marcus didn't catch the ice in her voice. "I'm just being honest. Not everyone has the luxury of not working." That night, Sarah emailed her lawyer. "He's ready. Let him file." A week later, Marcus came home with papers. He walked into the living room where Sarah was reading and dropped them on the coffee table. "I want a divorce." Sarah looked up calmly. "Okay." Her composure threw him. He'd expected tears, begging, maybe anger. Instead, she just looked at him with those steady, knowing eyes. "I've already consulted with an attorney," Marcus continued. "I think we can handle this fairly. Split everything down the middle, and I'll need some temporary support while I restructure the business." "Support?" Sarah repeated. "Alimony. Just for a year or two. The business has been supporting you for a decade. It's only fair." Sarah could have destroyed him right there. Could have pulled out her own documents and shown him the truth. Instead, she nodded slowly. "You should probably consult with your attorney about the specifics. I'll have my lawyer reach out." Marcus smiled, relieved it was going so smoothly. "I appreciate you being reasonable about this. And Sarah, you can stay in the guest house after we sell the main property. I won't leave you with nothing." The guest house on the property she owned, that her family had paid for. "That's very generous," Sarah said, her voice betraying nothing. After Marcus left the room, Sarah allowed herself one moment of emotion. She smiled. Not a happy smile. A predator's smile. Catherine Morrison received a call that evening. He filed, and he's asking for alimony. "Of course he is," Catherine said, satisfaction evident in her voice. "This just keeps getting better. Did he bring the mistress into it?" "Not yet, but he will." "Good. Let him. Every mistake makes our case stronger. Now we wait for the court date and let him dig himself deeper." Over the next months, Marcus did exactly that. He moved Jessica into a luxury apartment, paid for with the company card. He bought her jewelry, took her on vacation to Turks and Caicos, posted photos on social media that made it obvious he'd moved on. Friends reached out to Sarah with concern. "Have you seen his Instagram? He's not even trying to hide it." "I know," Sarah said calmly. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine from Marcus's case. Every post, every public appearance with Jessica, every boastful claim about his success. It was all being documented, archived, and prepared for presentation in court. By June 2022, Marcus was living in what he thought was his triumph. New girlfriend, pending divorce from his useless wife, and confident he'd walk away with millions. The court date was set for September 15th, 2022. Marcus's lawyer had tried to warn him that Sarah's legal team seemed unusually prepared, unusually confident. But Marcus dismissed concern. "She has nothing," he told his attorney. "I build everything. She'll get a fair split, and we'll move on." His attorney, a mid-tier divorce lawyer who primarily handled simple cases, didn't push back. He didn't realize he was walking his client into a massacre. September 15th was approaching, and Sarah was ready. The meeting to finalize Marcus's divorce demands took place in his attorney's office on a Tuesday morning in August. Marcus arrived 20 minutes early, bringing Jessica with him. His lawyer, David Brennan, tried to hide his surprise when the girlfriend walked in. "Marcus, I'm not sure it's appropriate for her." "Jessica is part of my life now," Marcus said firmly, his hand on her lower back. "She should know what we're dealing with." Jessica smiled nervously and took a seat in the corner. She wore a sundress that cost more than most people's weekly paycheck, paid for with a company card that Marcus still believed was his personal piggy bank. David sighed and opened his briefcase. All right, let's go through your asset list and what you're requesting in the settlement. Marcus leaned back confidently. The house is worth about $2.5 million now, right? Maybe more. I want to sell it and split the proceeds. The business is valued at around $1.2 million based on annual revenue. I'll keep operational control, but Sarah should get a cash settlement of half the value. The cars, I'll take a Mercedes. She can have the Lexus. Retirement accounts split 50-50. And like I mentioned, I'll need alimony for 24 months while I restructure the business. David was writing notes, his pen moving slower as Marcus continued. Marcus, about the alimony, you're the primary earner. Typically, you will be paying Sarah and not. David, I've been supporting her for 15 years. She hasn't worked a day since we got married. I need time to stabilize things after this divorce. It's completely reasonable. And the house, David continued carefully. I'll need to see the deed and all purchase documents. Who's listed as the... We both are, Marcus interrupted. We bought it together in 2014. I'm not trying to cheat her out of anything. 50-50 is fair. From the corner, Jessica spoke up. You're being so generous, babe. Most men would fight for more. Marcus smiled at her, the expression of a man who believed he was being magnanimous. I'm not like most men. I believe in doing the right thing. David suppressed the urge to ask what was right about parading your mistress into a divorce strategy meeting. Instead, he made a note. Client seems unusually confident about asset ownership. Need to verify all claims. One more thing, Marcus added. Sarah's been really calm about all this. Almost too calm. Do you think she's planning something? David had been wondering the same thing. In his 15 years of practice, he'd never seen a spouse react to divorce papers with such complete composure. Has she retained counsel? I assume so. Her father has money, so she probably hired someone decent. But honestly, what can they argue? The facts are the facts. Marcus, in high-asset divorces, facts can be complicated. If her family wealth is involved, there might be trusts, separate property claims. We should prepare for her. David. Marcus's voice turned sharp. I'm not worried. Everything we have, I built. Yes, her family helped early on, but that was years ago. Ancient history. Let's stay focused on getting me what I deserve. What Marcus deserved. David made another note, this one for himself. Client has unrealistic expectations. This could go very badly. After the meeting, Marcus and Jessica went to lunch at RPM Italian, a trendy restaurant in River North. Marcus ordered a $300 bottle of wine to celebrate. I can't believe how easy this is, he said, raising his glass. I thought she'd fight. Thought there'd be drama. Jessica clinked her glass against his. Maybe she knows she can't win. You're obviously the successful one. She's just been along for the ride. Marcus had told Jessica a version of their story where he was a self-made entrepreneur, and Sarah was the fortunate wife who got to enjoy his success. Jessica believed it completely. Why wouldn't she? Marcus believed it too. When this is finalized, Marcus said, reaching across the table for her hand, we can really start our life together. Maybe we'll get a place downtown. Something modern. A fresh start. Jessica's eyes lit up. Really? Like one of those new high-rises with the floor-to-ceiling windows. Whatever you want. What Marcus didn't mention was that he'd already calculated his expected divorce settlement in his head. Roughly $1.8 million from the house and business split. Enough to buy a nice condo, maintain his lifestyle, and still look successful. He'd show Sarah and everyone else that leaving her had been the right decision. That afternoon, he posted an Instagram photo of himself and Jessica at the restaurant, wine glasses raised, both of them smiling. The caption, new chapters, new happiness. Life's too short for anything less. The post got 147 likes. It also got screenshot by 3 different people who immediately sent it to Sarah's attorney. Sarah saw the Instagram post while sitting in Catherine Morrison's office. Catherine had her laptop turned so they could both view Marcus's social media. Life's too short, Catherine read aloud, her tone dripping with irony. Is he actively trying to lose his case, or is he just naturally the stupid? Sarah didn't respond immediately. She stared at the photo, Marcus looking smug and vindicated, Jessica looking young and naive. Part of her felt anger, but mostly she felt something colder, anticipation. He has no idea what's coming, Sarah said quietly. No, Catherine agreed. He really doesn't. Now, let's review what his attorney is requesting. She pulled up the formal demand letter that had arrived that morning. The list was audacious. 50% of the home sale proceeds. $600,000 cash settlement for his half of business valuation. Full ownership of the 2021 Mercedes S-Class. 50% of all retirement and investment accounts. $12,000 monthly alimony for 24 months. He's asking for what amounts to roughly $2.1 million in total value, Catherine said, plus nearly $300,000 in alimony over 2 years. For the business and house he doesn't own, Sarah said, purchased with money he never earned. Correct. Now, here's where this gets interesting. His attorney is David Brennan. I've dealt with him before. He's competent enough for simple divorces, but this is beyond his expertise. He clearly hasn't done deep discovery on asset origins. That works in our favor. Catherine pulled out a thick binder. This is what we're presenting in court. Every document proving source of funds for every major asset. Bank transfers from your family trust. The original business formation papers showing the $850,000 capital contribution from your father's LLC. The home purchase records showing payment from your trust fund. Even the car lease agreements, all in the name of family entities. Sarah flipped through the pages. Years of her life, reduced to financial transactions. Every gift her family had given Marcus. Every safety net they provided. Every dollar they'd invested in his fantasy of being self-made. Does he have any claim to anything? Sarah asked. His personal retirement account, which has about $80,000. His 2015 Honda Accord that he owned before marriage. And his personal belongings. That's it. And what about his business claims? He'll argue he built a company. That sweat equity counts. Catherine smiled. Sweat equity is a real concept in divorce law, but it requires proof that the business genuinely increased in value due to the efforts of the working spouse. The problem for Marcus is that his business has been consistently unprofitable or barely breaking even for years. Without continued capital infusions from your family, which we can prove with bank records, it would have failed years ago. So his successful company is actually a failing venture kept alive by my family's money. Exactly. And we have testimony lined up from your father's accountant, who can walk through every single financial transaction. Marcus's own tax returns will show that his reported business income barely covered expenses. It's devastating evidence. Sarah felt a strange mixture of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also sadness. She'd loved Marcus once, believed in him, supported his dreams not because she wanted power over him, but because she wanted him to be happy. And this was how he repaid her. Public humiliation, betrayal, and demands for money he never earned. What happens next? Sarah asked. We file our response, which will be professionally cordial. We'll request full financial discovery, bank statements, business records, credit card statements. His attorney should be requesting the same from us, and we'll comply completely. We want them to see the evidence. Then we wait for the court date. How do you think he'll react when he sees our response? Catherine leaned back in her chair. If he's smart, he'll panic and try to settle immediately. If he's as arrogant as he appears, he'll dismiss it as bluffing and walk straight into that courtroom. Convinced he's going to win. For your sake, I hope he's arrogant. Why? Because the settlement is practical and efficient. But watching him realize the truth in front of a judge, that's justice. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't want a settlement. I want him to hear it from a judge. I want him to understand, completely and publicly, what he's done. Catherine nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. The weeks leading up to the September 15th court date were a study in contrasts. Marcus grew increasingly confident, even careless. Sarah grew increasingly focused, increasingly prepared. Marcus hired a business valuator who looked at Thomson Strategic Consulting's revenue projections, conveniently inflated, and came back with an assessment of $1.2 million. The valuator didn't dig into profit margins, didn't question the unusual consulting fees that periodically appear in the accounts, didn't ask where the original capital came from. Marcus paid him $5,000 for the report and considered it money well spent. Meanwhile, Sarah's team conducted an investigation that would have impressed a federal prosecutor. The forensic accountant traced every dollar through a maze of LLCs, trusts, and bank accounts. The findings were damning. The house. Purchase price, $2.3 million, 2014. Down payment, $700,000 from Sarah's family trust. Mortgage payments, paid from joint account funded primarily by trust distributions to Sarah. Property taxes, paid by Family LLC. Major renovations, $300,000, funded entirely by Sarah's trust. Current owners, Riverside Properties LLC, controlled by Sarah's family. Marcus's equity, $0. The business. Initial capital, $850,000, 2012, from Thomson Family Trust. Supposed loan repayment, $0. Additional capital infusions, $430,000 over 10 years. Total family investment, $1,280,000. Net profit over 10 years, $127,000. Marcus's actual contribution, his labor and a $15,000 contribution in 2012. True business value, potentially negative when debt is considered. The vehicles, Mercedes S-Class, lease-through company, payments from business account funded by trust. Lexus SUV, owned by Family LLC, registered to Sarah. Marcus's Honda Accord, 2015 owned outright, worth $8,000. Retirement accounts. Sarah's IRA, $340,000, funded by her trust. Marcus's 401k, $78,000 from his previous employment. Joint investments, $520,000, entirely from Sarah's trust contributions. The picture was clear. Marcus Thompson owned essentially nothing. He'd been living a life funded entirely by his wife's family, while simultaneously convincing himself he was self-made. But the most damaging evidence wasn't financial. It was personal. The investigator had documented Marcus's affair with painful precision. Hotel stays, 47 nights over 18 months, costing $63,000. Dinners and entertainment, $31,000. Jewelry purchases, $18,000, including a $12,000 diamond bracelet for Jessica's birthday. Vacation to Turks and Caicos, $15,000. All charged to company cards. Total spent on the affair, $127,000. Conveniently, exactly the amount of profit Marcus claimed his business had generated. Catherine Morrison assembled all of this into a presentation that was part legal brief, part financial autopsy. She prepared exhibits, witness lists, and a timeline that showed Marcus's growing extravagance perfectly correlating with his family's increased financial support. 3 days before the court date, Catherine called Sarah. Marcus's attorney just filed his final witness list and evidence. They're bringing the business valuator to testify about the company's worth. They have character witnesses who will talk about Marcus's work ethic. And they're going to argue that your lack of employment means you were dependent on his income. What are we bringing? Sarah asked. The truth, your father's accountant. The forensic financial analyst. Documentary evidence that tells a story no judge can ignore. And Sarah, I want you to testify. Me? Yes. I want the judge to hear directly from you about the marriage, about your family support, about Marcus's claims of being self-made. Your testimony, combined with the financial evidence, will be devastating. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. What if I get emotional? What if? Then you get emotional, Catherine said firmly. You're not a robot. You're a woman whose husband betrayed her, humiliated her publicly, and is now trying to steal money from her family. If you cry, you cry. If you get angry, you get angry. But mostly, I want to tell the truth, calmly and clearly. Can you do that? Sarah thought about the Instagram post, about Marcus calling her useless in front of friends, about the years she'd spent supporting a man who gave her no credit. Yes, she said, I can do that. The night before court, Sarah barely slept. She reviewed her testimony notes. Imagine the courtroom. Wonder how Marcus would react. Part of her almost felt bad for what was about to happen to him. But then she remembered his words. I built this life. She's lucky I support her. And the guilt evaporated. Across town, Marcus slept soundly next to Jessica, dreaming of his imminent financial windfall. He'd already started looking at downtown condos, already planned how he'd invest his settlement money, already imagined satisfaction of walking away from Sarah with millions of dollars he believed he'd earned. Tomorrow, he thought, begins the rest of my life. He had no idea how right he was. The Cook County Courthouse loomed imposing and gray under September clouds. Sarah arrived at 8:30 a.m., 90 minutes before the scheduled hearing. Catherine met her at the entrance, carrying 2 briefcases and wearing a charcoal suit that meant business. How are you feeling? Catherine asked. Ready, Sarah said. And she dressed carefully. A navy blue suit, pearls that had belonged to her grandmother, minimal makeup. She looked respectable, serious, and nothing like the useless woman Marcus had described. They entered courtroom 4C, a wood-paneled room with high ceilings and the kind of gravity that made people speak in hushed tones. The judge's bench sat elevated, flanked by state and national flags. Sarah took her seat at the plaintiff's table and arranged her notes with steady hands. At 9:45 a.m., the doors opened again. Marcus walked in like he was entering a networking event. He wore an expensive gray suit, light blue tie, pocket square perfectly folded. Jessica was with him, wearing a dress far too casual for court. David Brennan followed behind them, looking significantly less confident than his client. Jessica, you should probably wait outside, David said quietly. I want to be here for Marcus, she protested. The gallery is fine, but you can't sit at our table. Come on. Marcus kissed Jessica's cheek before she retreated to the spectator benches. He caught Sarah's eye across the courtroom and had the audacity to smile slightly, as if they were old friends meeting for coffee. Sarah didn't react, didn't smile back, didn't frown, just looked at him with those calm, knowing eyes. Marcus's smile faltered. Something in her expression made him uneasy, though he couldn't identify what. She looked too composed, too ready. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Reynolds presiding. Judge Reynolds entered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair, reading glasses on a chain, and a reputation for having zero tolerance for nonsense. She'd been on the bench for 23 years and had seen every divorce trick imaginable. Please be seated, she said, her voice carrying authority without raising volume. We're here for Thompson versus Thompson, dissolution of marriage. I reviewed the preliminary filings from both parties. She looked up over her glasses, her gaze moving between the 2 tables. This appears to be a high-asset case with significant disagreement about property division. Mr. Brennan, you're representing the respondent. David stood. Yes, Your Honor. And Ms. Morrison for the petitioner. Catherine stood smoothly. Correct, Your Honor. Very well. Mr. Brennan, your client filed the initial petition. Let's begin with your presentation. David Brennan stood and approached the podium, legal pad in hand. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a straightforward case of asset division following a 15-year marriage. My client, Marcus Thompson, is a successful business owner who has been the primary income earner throughout the marriage. The respondent, Sarah Thompson, has not been employed outside the home during this time. Judge Reynolds was already writing notes. Continue. Mr. Thompson is requesting an equitable division of marital assets, which include a home currently valued at $2.5 million, a business valued at $1.2 million, vehicles, and investment accounts. He's also requesting temporary spousal support to facilitate business restructuring during this transition. Catherine was scribbling notes, occasionally glancing at Sarah with an expression that said, just wait. Your Honor, may I call my first witness? David asked. Proceed. I called Marcus Thompson to stand. Marcus stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked to the witness stand with the confidence of someone about to deliver a winning presentation. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down, making direct eye contact with the judge. David began gently. Mr. Thompson, can you describe your role in the marriage? Of course. I was the provider. I started my business, Thompson Strategic Consulting, in 2012. Over the past decade, I built it into a successful firm serving mid-sized companies across the Midwest. The income from that business supported our lifestyle, the house, the cars, vacations, everything. And Mrs. Thompson's role? Sarah didn't work. She volunteered sometimes, managed the house. I always told her she didn't need to work because I was earning enough for both of us. Judge Reynolds interrupted. Mr. Thompson, when you say your business, you started it with your own capital? Marcus hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Well, there was a loan involved initially. Sarah's father helped arrange it through his banking connections. But I paid that back through the business profits years ago. Do you have documentation of that loan repayment? The judge asked. I'd have to check with my accountant. But yes, I'm certain it was paid back. Catherine made a note. Sarah could read her handwriting from across the table. No documentation because it doesn't exist. David continued. Mr. Thompson, can you describe the deterioration of your marriage? Marcus shifted, adopting a more somber expression. Sarah and I grew apart. She became distant, uninterested in my work. I felt unappreciated. Eventually, I realized we become different people who wanted different things. And you've since formed a new relationship? I have. I met someone who understands my ambitions, who supports my goals. Jessica has been a partner in ways Sarah never was. From the gallery, Jessica beamed. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her hands clenched slightly in her lap. Judge Reynolds looked at Marcus with an expression that was impossible to read. Mr. Thompson, you're requesting spousal support despite being, as you claim, the primary earner? Yes, Your Honor. The divorce process has been costly, and I need time to restructure the business. It's temporary, just 2 years while I stabilize. I see. Ms. Morrison, do you have questions for this witness? Catherine stood. Yes, Your Honor. Many questions. She approached the witness stand like a chess player who just spotted checkmate in 3 moves. Mr. Thompson, you testified that you paid back the loan from your wife's family. Do you have any bank records, canceled checks, or wire transfer confirmations of that repayment? As I said, I'd need to check. You don't have them, do you? Because you never paid back a single dollar. That's not. Let's move on. You stated you bought the house. Where did the $700,000 down payment come from? Marcus blinked. That was a combination of savings and the loan. Whose savings? Our savings. Joint accounts. Catherine pulled out a document. I'm showing you Exhibit A, which is the wire transfer record for the down payment. Can you tell the court whose name appears as the sender? Marcus leaned forward, squinting at the paper. His face went pale. Thompson Family Trust. That's your wife's family trust, correct? Not yours. Yes, but we're married, so... And the mortgage payments. Who's been making those? We both have from our joint account. Let's look at Exhibit B, the joint account statements for the past 5 years. Catherine projected them on a screen. Can you identify the primary source of deposits into this account? Marcus stared at the screen. Monthly deposits of $15,000 to $20,000, all labeled Trust Distribution S. Thompson. Those are trust distributions to your wife, Catherine said. Meaning the mortgage on the house you claim to own has been paid entirely with your wife's money. Is that accurate? I contributed too. My salary. Your salary from the business that was capitalized entirely with your wife's family money and has been kept afloat by continued capital injections from that same family. Correct. David Brennan stood. Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative. Overruled. Judge Reynolds said, leaning forward with obvious interest. Mr. Thompson, please answer question. Marcus's confidence was cracking. The business has been profitable. I've earned my salary. We'll return to that. One more question for now, Mr. Thompson. This business you built, have you ever looked at the formation documents? Do you know who holds the shares? I hold the shares. I'm the CO. Catherine pulled out another document. Exhibit C, the LLC formation papers for Thompson Strategic Consulting. Can you read the ownership structure for the court? Marcus took the paper with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the text, and his face went from pale to gray. It says, Thompson Family Trust holds 85% ownership. Marcus Thompson holds 15%. The courtroom went completely silent. So you own 15% of a company you claim to have built entirely yourself. Is that correct? I signed these papers years ago. I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you never looked. You assumed, and now you're asking this court for a half of assets you don't own, funded by money you never earned. No further questions at this time, Your Honor. Marcus stepped down from the witness stand looking like he'd been physically struck. He sat next to David, who was frantically flipping through documents, clearly seeing this case disintegrate in real time. Jessica, in the gallery, looked confused and increasingly uncomfortable. Judge Reynolds removed her glasses. Ms. Morrison, please call your first witness. I call Sarah Thompson to stand. Sarah walked to the witness stand with her head high. She wore her grandmother's pearls like armor. After being sworn in, she sat down and looked directly at the judge. Catherine began gently. Mrs. Thompson, can you describe your family's financial background? My grandfather made strategic investments in telecommunications in the 1970s. My father built on that foundation, creating a diversified investment portfolio. Our family's philosophy has always been to live modestly and support loved ones privately. And when you married Marcus, did your family support him financially? Yes. My father believed in Marcus's potential. When Marcus wanted to start a business, my father contributed $850,000 from our family trust. Was this structured as a traditional bank loan? No, it was a family investment, with the understanding that if the business became profitable, the capital would be repaid. That never happened. Why not? Sarah's voice remained steady. Because the business never generated sufficient profit. Over the years, my family contributed an additional $430,000 to keep it operational. Judge Reynolds interrupted. Mrs. Thompson, did your husband know these were family funds, not bank loans? Sarah met her eyes. I told him my family was helping. I don't know what he chose to hear or remember, but every document clearly shows the source of funds. He signed the papers. Did he ever ask questions about the business structure or ownership? No, Your Honor. Marcus was focused on running the business, on the public perception of success. He never looked at the financial foundation beneath it. Catherine continued, Mrs. Thompson, your husband has characterized you as not working during your marriage. Is that accurate? I didn't have traditional employment, no, but I volunteered extensively, 20 hours a week with 3 different organizations. I managed our household, our social obligations, and I quietly managed our actual finances, because if I hadn't, we would have lost everything years ago. Can you elaborate on that? Marcus spent money as if it were unlimited. Expensive dinners, luxury purchases, trips. He believed the business was generating that income. In reality, I was coordinated with my father's accountant to make sure there was always enough in our accounts to cover Marcus's spending without him realizing the source. Why didn't you tell him? For the first time, emotion cracked Sarah's composed exterior. Because I loved him. Because I wanted him to feel successful, to feel proud of himself. I thought supporting him silently was the kindest thing I could do. I was wrong. When did you discover the affair? August 2021. I found messages on his phone. What did you do? I documented everything. And I started preparing for this inevitability. Catherine pulled out a thick binder. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibits D through M, which represent a comprehensive financial analysis of the Thompson marriage conducted by forensic accountant Robert Chun. She distributed copies to the judge and to David Brennan, whose face fell further with each page. Mrs. Thompson, can you summarize what these documents show? Sarah had memorized the numbers. The house was purchased with $700,000 from my trust, with mortgage payments totaling $380,000 over 8 years, all from trust distributions to me. Total family investment, $1.08 million. Marcus's contribution, 0. The business received $1.28 million in capital from my family. Documented profit, $127,000 over 10 years. That profit was paid to Marcus as salary and spent entirely on personal expenses, including $127,000 on his affair. The judge looked up sharply. The entire profit of the business was spent on the affair? Yes, Your Honor. Hotels, dinners, jewelry for his mistress, all charged to company credit cards. Catherine displayed the credit card statements on screen. Dozens of transactions at luxury hotels, 5-star restaurants, a $12,000 bracelet from Tiffany's. And during this time, Mr. Thompson was calling you useless publicly? Yes. Can you give an example? Sarah's voice wavered slightly. At a charity dinner in February, he gave a speech about building success without a safety net, without a rich family to bail him out. Everyone in the room knew that was directed at me. He built his entire identity on erasing my family's contributions. Revelation 1. The house, 42:00-43:30. Catherine projected the property deed onto the screen. Exhibit N, the deed to the residence at 1847 Willow Creek Drive. Your Honor, you'll see the property is owned by Riverside Properties, LLC, a company wholly controlled by the Thompson Family Trust. Sarah's family, not Marcus's. David Brennan stood weakly. Your Honor, even if the property is technically held by an LLC, it was the marital home. My client has equity through what, Counselor? Judge Reynolds asked. Please explain what basis your client has for equity in a property he never funded. David sat down. He had no answer. Marcus leaned over and whispered frantically, You said we own the house. You told me you own the house. David hissed back. You never brought me the actual deed. Revelation 2. The business capital, 43:30-45:00. Catherine called Robert Chun, the forensic accountant, to the stand. He testified with precision of someone who traced every dollar through a decade of records. Mr. Chun, what was the total capital investment in Thompson Strategic Consulting? $1.28 million, all from the Thompson Family Trust. And what was Marcus Thompson's personal capital contribution? $15,000 in 2012 from his personal savings. That represents 1.2% of total capitalization. What has been the net profitability of the business? Over 10 years, $127,000 in cumulative profit. However, that profit was entirely offset by the $127,000 in personal expenses charged to company accounts, most related to Mr. Thompson's extramarital affair. So the actual net position of the business is what? 0, or more accurately, negative when you account for the $1.28 million in unreturned family investment. Judge Reynolds interrupted. Mr. Chun, in your professional opinion, if the Thompson family had not provided continued financial support, would this business still exist? No, Your Honor. It would have failed in 2015, 2018, and again in 2020. Each time, family capital infusions kept operational. Revelation 3. Marcus's true contribution, 45:00-46:30. Catherine approached the bench. Your Honor, I want to be clear about what Mr. Thompson actually contributed to this marriage financially. His initial $15,000 investment, his labor, which had value, and his salary, which totaled approximately $1.2 million over 10 years. That sounds substantial, the judge noted. It does, until you realize that salary came from a business funded entirely by his wife's family. So Marcus Thompson was essentially being paid by his wife's family to run their business, while spending that salary on personal luxuries and an affair, and then demanding half of everything in the divorce. David tried again. Your Honor, sweat equity is value. My client's work. Sweat equity is valuable when it increases asset value, Catherine interrupted. Mr. Thompson's business didn't increase in value. It barely survived. His sweat equity maintained a break-even operation funded by other people's money. Revelation final. The humiliating question, 46:30-47:00. Judge Reynolds set down her pen and looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Thompson, I want to make sure I understand your position. You're asking this court to award you half of a house you never funded, half of a business you never capitalized, vehicles you never purchased, and investment accounts you never contributed to. You're also requesting alimony from a woman whose family has been supporting you for 15 years. Is that correct? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Your Honor, I didn't realize. You thought what exactly? That signing papers without reading them would somehow transform other people's money into yours. I built that business, Marcus said desperately. I worked hard. You worked hard spending other people's money, the judge said flatly. Mr. Brennan, does your client have anything to say that actually addresses the financial evidence? David Brennan looked defeated. We request a recess to confer with our client. Denied. This evidence is clear and comprehensive. I've seen enough. Judge Reynolds shuffled her papers and looked at both parties. I'm prepared to rule from a bench. The financial evidence is overwhelming and, frankly, damning. Marcus was visibly sweating now. Jessica had shrunk down in her seat, eyes wide. Mr. Thompson, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen arrogance. I've seen entitlement. But I rarely see someone who has so thoroughly deluded themselves about their own circumstances. You built your identity on a foundation of other people's generosity, which you either forgot or chose to ignore. You then betrayed the woman who made your lifestyle possible and publicly humiliated her. And now you have the audacity to demand that she give you money for the privilege of being disrespected. Your Honor, I'm not finished. The evidence shows that you contributed virtually nothing to the marital assets. The house belongs to your wife's family trust. The business was capitalized and sustained by your wife's family. Even the profit you claim to have generated was immediately spent on an affair. You have no claim to any of it. Marcus's lawyer tried one last time. Your Honor, my client's salary over 10 years was paid by a business funded entirely by his wife's family. The judge cut him off. Mr. Brennan, I suggest you advise your client to accept reality. Judge Reynolds delivered her ruling in a voice that carried to every corner of the courtroom. Mrs. Thompson retains full ownership of all marital assets, as they were funded entirely by her separate property. The house, the business, the vehicles, all remain with her. Mr. Thompson is entitled to his personal belongings, his 15% share of the business, which appears to be worthless, and his 2015 Honda Accord. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Furthermore, Mr. Thompson is ordered to pay $50,000 in Mrs. Thompson's legal fees, given that she was forced to defend assets that were clearly hers from the outset. This case was a waste of this court's time and resources. The judge paused and added, Mr. Thompson, let this be an expensive lesson in gratitude, humility, and basic financial literacy. Petition for divorce granted, with the division of assets as I've outlined. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down like thunder. Marcus sat frozen, his face ashen. David Brennan was already packing his briefcase, eager to escape the disaster. From a gallery, Jessica stood up and quietly left the courtroom without looking back. Sarah remained seated, her hands folded, her expression calm. She'd won. But the victory felt less like triumph and more like the simple restoration of truth. Catherine leaned over and whispered, That's what justice looks like. Marcus finally stood, his movements mechanical. He walked past Sarah's table without looking at her. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. The man who'd walked in like he owned the world was leaving like a ghost. In the hallway outside, Jessica was already calling an Uber. When Marcus approached her, she shook her head. I can't do this, she said quietly. I thought you were. I thought you had. She couldn't finish the sentence. She just walked away. Marcus stood alone in the courthouse corridor, surrounded by strangers, realizing for the first time in his adult life that he had nothing. No house, no business, no girlfriend, no money, just the clothes he was wearing and a slowly dawning understanding of how completely he destroyed himself. The formal divorce was finalized 30 days later. Marcus didn't contest any of the judge's rulings. He couldn't. The evidence was irrefutable, and his attorney had advised him that appealing would only cost more money he didn't have. The final settlement looked like this. Sarah Thompson receives the family home, valued at $2.5 million, full ownership of Thompson Strategic Consulting, LLC, all investment and retirement accounts, $860,000, the Lexus SUV, all furniture and household items, $50,000 in legal fee reimbursement from Marcus. Marcus Thompson receives his 2015 Honda Accord, valued at $8,000, his personal belongings, clothes, books, etc., his 401k account, $78,000, a harsh lesson in humility. The day the divorce was finalized, Sarah stood in the house, her house, and felt the weight of 15 years lifting. Catherine had offered to be there, but Sarah wanted this moment alone. She walked through the rooms Marcus had once dominated with his presence, his loud confidence, his absolute certainty that he was the one who mattered. Now those rooms were quiet, and in that quiet, Sarah found something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Proud of you. Dinner this weekend?" Sarah smiled. "Yes. Thank you for everything." "You did this yourself," he replied. "We just provided the receipts." Marcus, the fall. In the months after the divorce, Marcus's life unraveled with stunning speed. Thompson Strategic Consulting was dissolved by Sarah, who discovered what the forensic accountant had confirmed. The business had been hemorrhaging money for years. She recovered what assets existed and closed it permanently. Without the business, without the house, without the lifestyle, Marcus had to confront who he actually was. The answer was devastating. He was a 42-year-old man with moderate sales skills, no real assets, and a reputation in shambles. Jessica had blocked his number the day of the court hearing. When he tried to reach out via LinkedIn, she deleted him. She'd already moved on to dating a doctor who actually owned his condo. Marcus moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a suburban complex, the kind of place he would have driven past without a second glance a year earlier. His neighbors were young couples, single mothers, retirees on fixed incomes, people living normal lives with normal struggles. He got a job as a sales manager at a mid-sized software company. The salary was $85,000, decent, but a fraction of what he'd been earning before. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was now genuinely earning his living for the first time in a decade. His former friends from the country club stopped returning calls. The networking contacts who'd admired his entrepreneurial success disappeared. Turns out, people are attracted to success, not to the appearance of success. Some nights, Marcus would sit in his modest apartment and try to understand how he'd been so wrong about everything, how he'd convinced himself that he'd earned what was given to him, how he'd mistaken patience for weakness and generosity for obligation. The memories haunted him. Sarah's calm face in the courtroom, the judge's cutting words, the documents proving he'd built his entire identity on borrowed foundations. The look on Jessica's face when she realized he was broke. He tried to be angry at Sarah for tricking him, at her family for setting him up, at the judge for being unfair. But the anger wouldn't stick, because deep down in the quiet moments he couldn't avoid, Marcus knew the truth. He'd done this to himself. Sarah's journey after the divorce was different. Not easy, but purposeful. The first thing she did was sell the house. Not because she needed the money, but because she needed the closure. Every room held memories of a life that had been built on lies. She bought a smaller, elegant townhouse downtown with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was entirely hers. Every mortgage payment, every design choice, every moment of peace. The second thing she did surprised everyone. She enrolled in a graduate program for nonprofit management. For years, she volunteered but never pursued it professionally. Now, at 39, she decided it was time. "I spent 15 years making someone else feel successful," she told her father over dinner. "I want to build something that's actually mine." Her father smiled. "You already did." You just had to prove it in court first. With the dissolution of Thompson Strategic Consulting, Sarah had recovered about $200,000 in remaining assets. She used it as seed money to start the Thompson Foundation for Women in Transition, a nonprofit providing legal assistance, financial counseling, and emotional support for women going through difficult divorces. I had resources, Sarah told a local reporter who covered the foundation's launch. I had family support, money for attorneys, time to build my case. Most women don't have that. They're trapped by financial dependence, by fear, by not knowing their rights. I want to change that. The foundation's first year helped 43 women navigate divorce proceedings. Sarah hired 2 attorneys, a financial advisor, and a therapist. She secured grants from family foundations and private donors. The work was demanding, but it filled her with purpose in ways that being Mrs. Marcus Thompson never had. She also started dating again, carefully. A few coffee dates that went nowhere, a brief relationship with a colleague that ended amicably. She wasn't rushing. For the first time in her adult life, she was learning who Sarah Thompson was when she wasn't defined by someone else. One evening, 18 months after the divorce, she went to a foundation fundraiser. A man approached her, a professor of economics at Northwestern, recently widowed, with kind eyes and a gentle sense of humor. I read about your foundation, he said. What you're doing is remarkable. Thank you, Sarah replied. It's personal work. The best work usually is. They talked for an hour. When he asked for her number, she gave it. When he called the next day, she answered. And when, 6 months later, he told her he loved her, she realized she could say it back without fear, because she'd learned the most important lesson. Supporting someone doesn't mean erasing yourself. Love doesn't require self-destruction, and the right person will see your value without you having to prove it every day. 2 years after the divorce, Sarah was giving a talk at a women's empowerment conference. The ballroom was full, nearly 300 women, many of them survivors of their own difficult relationships. People often ask me if I regret supporting my ex-husband, Sarah said from the podium. The answer is complicated. I don't regret helping someone I loved. I don't regret being generous. What I regret is not requiring respect in return. I regret accepting silence as my role. I regret believing that love meant making myself smaller, so someone else could feel bigger. The room was silent, hundreds of women recognizing themselves in her words. The lesson isn't don't support your partner. The lesson is support doesn't mean sacrifice. Generosity doesn't mean invisibility. And if someone can't acknowledge what you contribute, whether that's money or time or emotional labor, they don't deserve to benefit from it. She paused, collecting her thoughts. What happened to me in that courtroom wasn't revenge. It was truth. For 15 years, my ex-husband told himself a story where he was a hero, and I was a supporting character. He believed it so completely that when faced with evidence to the contrary, he couldn't process it. That's what arrogance does. It replaces reality with more flattering fiction. But here's what I learned. The truth doesn't need you to shout it. It doesn't need dramatics or revenge plots. The truth just needs documentation. It needs patience. And when the moment comes, it needs someone brave enough to present it clearly. The audience erupted in applause. After the talk, women lined up to share their stories. So many echoes of Sarah's experience. Husbands who claim credit for family wealth, partners who diminish their contributions, men who confuse support with ownership. What do I do? One woman asked, tears in her eyes. He says I've never contributed anything, but I gave up my career to raise our kids. Sarah took her hands. Document everything. Keep records. Find a good attorney. And remember, someone else's delusion about their importance doesn't change the reality of your value. You just have to be willing to prove it. The video draws to a close with one final scene. Sarah, 3 years after the divorce, standing in the Thompson Foundation office. On the wall behind her, a photo of 43 women, the first group the foundation helped. She's smiling, genuinely happy, surrounded by her team. The narrator's voice returns. Marcus Thompson learned the hardest lesson a person can learn. That confidence without foundation is just arrogance. that taking credit for other people's contributions eventually comes with a bill, and that the people you underestimate are often the ones who hold all the power. They just choose not to use it until you force their hand. Sarah Thompson learned something different. That patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. That documentation is more powerful than confrontation. And at the right time to reveal the truth isn't when you're angry, it's when you're ready to move forward without looking back. In the end, Marcus lost everything he thought defined him. Sarah gained everything that actually mattered: respect, autonomy, purpose, and peace. Because the truth is this: you can live a lie for years, maybe even decades. You can convince yourself that you earned what you were given, that you built what you borrowed, that you deserve what you never valued. But eventually, reality comes due. And when it does, the only question that matters is this: can you handle the truth? Marcus couldn't. Sarah could. And that made all the difference.